will be that much worse for Tampa. What is the latest information, as far as you understand it, about what Tampa is facing, and what is your message to any citizens in Tampa or the surrounding area right now?
Well, Jake, what we are concerned about is whether the storm continues to move to the west or not. If we remain on the good side of the storm, the back side of the storm, the surge will be less. If the storm moves further to the west and we are on the bad side of the storm, that's going to be a real problem. So my message is really very simple. If you haven't taken the appropriate steps to get to a level B, C, D, or E, you only have maybe 2 hours to do it. If it starts blowing consistently 40 miles an hour or more, I cannot send Tampa police officers or Tampa Fire Rescue to come and get you. You are on your own. We will come for you afterwards, but I can't put those men and women at risk. Do the right thing. Get out while you can. Let's ride this thing out. We're going to get through this together.
All right, Mayor Bob Buckhorn of Tampa, which is in the path of the eye of the hurricane. Thank you so much. Stay in touch. We're going to squeeze in another quick break. Our thanks to Anderson as well. We'll be right back with more coverage of Hurricane Irene. Thanks for being with us. Hurricane Irma.
I am totally blind, and Non-24 can make me show up to...
In the very near future. I apologize if there is some lost communication, but what I'd like to do is get in and show you what it looks driving on the Gulf Shore Road here. We'll just take you down this road. I guess I seem to have lost a little communication with you on the IFB, but to what you can see, to the extent you can see things, let's just take you down. Now, this road is parallel to the beach, and we have seen constant trees coming down, and we are seeing the wind gusts coming at us as we drive down. Just look at the gusts coming off of the street there. Monitoring the radio, because what is ultimately going to happen is this wind condition is going to meet the storm surge, and that will be flooding, and that is this worst case scenario that they're talking about. Shep?
Griff Jenkins, along the road there in Naples. We're watching in Hollywood, Florida from WSVN, where the waters are rising as well. And we happen to have on the line with us Juan Perez, who's the Miami-Dade County Police Chief. Chief, how are things in Miami-Dade?
Well, right now we're probably in the harshest of winds that we're going to experience for our portion of Irma. We're facing 80 to 100 mile per hour gusts, sustained anywhere from 60 to 70. For this to pass, and I expect that later on in the evening, I'll be able to put 1,200 men and women back out in the streets and start protecting our residents again and helping them out, saving lives.
Have you been getting a lot of calls for service? I know you have to keep first responders at bay for now, but have there been a lot of calls?
No, people understood we weren't going to be able to respond, so we messaged them real well. We had plenty of advance, so that worked to our favor. Nobody's really ventured out and risked their lives, so far that we know of. It's just right now what we do have is we already know that we have plenty of road blockages with debris, trees down, fences, power lines. Last count, we had 675 of the 1.1 million accounts for the power and light. From FP&L account, they're down. So we're talking it's probably increased. So we're probably 3/4 of our power grids are down, which is going to be a huge challenge for us. We'll have to manage through all that.
The police chief of Miami-Dade County, a lot of work ahead. What are your biggest concerns, Chief?
Well, right now, as soon as we start making an assessment and we hit the streets, we're going to do anything we can to save lives and look for folks that are stuck, trapped in houses, or that need us for emergency purposes. The secondary thing is with the power outages is obviously preventing crime from occurring and managing the intersections once people get out and about, so we can prevent some crashes. But it'll be all hands on deck, and we'll have to wear multiple hats on this. We've experienced this before. We do law enforcement at some point will become secondary, and it'll be a humanitarian role and just doing anything we can to help our residents.
Juan Perez is the chief of the Miami-Dade County Police Department. Chief, all the best to you and yours across Miami-Dade. Thank you.
Thank you, and I hope that the folks up north and the West Coast are watching what's happening here. Very minor. But so they can heed the warnings and do as their emergency, officials are telling them to do.
Chief, thanks again. Live pictures coming to us from Naples now. The strongest of the early bands are making their way into Naples. But look at what's coming in from WTVT in Tampa. Some people still walking on the beach in Clearwater and waving to beach. It's on the way, and look again at Naples. I'll show you what's on the way, and that's live from Naples. If we could switch back to Naples, and there it is, the first of the feeder bands, well over tropical storm force winds now. They're expecting hurricane force winds in southwest Florida, particularly southern Collier County, Everglades City, Marco Island, and up into the Naples area in a pretty short period of time. Remember, the winds, the hurricane force winds extend from the center of this storm about 80 miles. Depends on the update you get. Sometimes it's 70, sometimes it's 80. It varies a little bit. But generally speaking, from the center of the eye of the storm, 70 miles north, they're getting hurricane force winds. And with this storm moving at 9 miles an hour, they'll get hurricane force winds for a very long period of time. And you can see the flag ripping apart just a little bit there. And look down on Fort Lauderdale Beach from WSVN7. Fort Lauderdale Beach with some very heavy winds and high surf. Again, this now Fort Lauderdale you can see the palm trees and just an incredible amount of cameras and perspective that we're getting all across as that storm continues to move north on the west coast. The winds and the surge will be more prevalent in Broward County, which is just north of the Miami-Dade area. Broward County, which is Fort Lauderdale and Hollywood. That's where Fort Lauderdale Hollywood International Airport is, though not at this picture. But that's the general vicinity of that, one of the 3 major airports in South Florida. And in Fort Lauderdale Hollywood, they're expecting heavy wind and heavy surge over the next hour and a half. Then it becomes largely a Southwest Florida storm. And that's when Naples, Collier County, Lee County, in the Fort Myers and Cape Coral area come into play. And we're expecting the conditions to deteriorate there for the next couple of hours and then continuing into the evening. Tampa Bay will begin feeling the full force of this as well. In fact, we've just gotten word in Miami, some damage to the roof at the Miami Heat's arena. And we've seen it in a number of places. WSVN had some pictures of that just a short time ago. But if you're focusing on what's to come with this storm, it's Naples, and that's the picture on the right-hand side of your screen. Marco Island, which is south of Naples, is largely evacuated. Marco Island, a barrier island, a tourist destination for many, many decades. And it's certainly built up there to where a lot of snowbirds have come down, retirees from the Northeast and the Midwest who've retired down there to Marco Island. A lot for elderly population and certainly for families as well. It's difficult to get in and out of there on a good day with a lot of tourists in the height of the winter, but really difficult when there's a storm, and they've gotten it pretty well evacuated. It'll be interesting to see how Marco Island fares over the next day, because unless the storm makes a turn, and it may, we're expecting very high winds. We've just gotten this from the National Weather Service in Miami, has reported an extreme wind warning for western Collier County. 115-mile-an-hour plus winds in western Collier County. You know where you are along the Naples and Marco Island region. Top of the hour headlines right after this.
When you schedule with Safe by Autoglass, you get a text when we're on our way. You can see exactly when we'll arrive.
from W.
5 o'clock at night, in the morning, when it's dark. Any attempts at rescue will be just terrible, terrible.
It's a devastating storm, and we're just beginning to see the start of it as it starts barreling through Florida, even though it is going on the west side of Florida because of the outer bands of this enormous hurricane. It is also affecting the east. Bob Ryan, thank you so much. Our breaking news coverage of Hurricane Irma continues as the storm roars through Florida. Stay with us.
There are 24 hours in a day. Tempur-Pedic helps you get the most out of every one of them. Only proprietary Tempur material precisely conforms to your body. You get up to twice as much pressure relieving power, so you won't toss and turn. And Tempur-Pedic is the best.
but they are in there now and watching this as it comes in waves, sometimes pretty intense here. Naples could really get whacked here, both by the wind of up to 130 and then by a storm surge, maybe the worst spot for that storm surge, which will follow the eye anywhere from 10 to 15 feet. So it could be parts of places where I'm standing now could be underwater by tomorrow morning, and we could see real structural damage to these trees if this wind force keeps up. I'm a little surprised it's getting this strong this early, but I guess it's coming this way, Shepard. Now, a key thing is going to be after this storm passes through for rescue and recovery efforts, and I-75 is going to be critical to that effort. They're staging much of the stuff in Orlando right now. Medical teams, fuel teams, and first responders might be coming out of Orlando, so we could see some real heroism overnight and in the next 24 hours, Shepard.
The degrading of conditions, Steve, how long ago would you say that started?
15 minutes ago. This was, just fine to stand here now. Next hit, I'm going to go put my goggles on because it's picked up right after that warning. So officials here have been on top of things. Their websites, their sheriffs have been going door to door. They've really been doing everything they can. And this county is really not built for this kind of a storm. All government buildings in the Naples area can only withstand a Category 3 hurricane. So you might have the situation here where first responders in the emergency situation room are actually evacuating themselves in the peak of this storm.
Oh, man.
People who have to help people might need some help themselves.
Steve Harrigan live with us in Naples. Naples in the crosshairs. Our senior meteorologist Janice Dean is live now for us in the Extreme Weather Center. Janice, 3 or 4 days ago you would have thought Miami. And now it looks like Marco Island in Naples.
You know, the National Hurricane Center has done a pretty good job with that cone of uncertainty because the cone did show the west side of Florida, but the center was showing a potential South Florida landfall. But I will say 50, 60 miles from the center offshore from what we were predicting is pretty good when it comes to predicting these hurricanes. They can be unpredictable. They can wobble east or west. You and I have been covering hurricanes for a long time, and it certainly has the potential to maybe go where we first thought it was going to go. But right now, we're pretty certain we're going to continue to see sort of a northward parallel track along the west coast. Naples right now, remember the tropical storm force winds extend 220 miles from the center of this storm. Hurricane force winds extend 80 miles from the center of this storm. So I'm not surprised that Steve Harrigan is seeing or feeling at least tropical storm force winds. There's Naples right there. There's the center of the storm. A little bit of a wobble here towards the northwest. We're going to have to watch those advisories as they come in. The next one at 2 p.m. complete advisory from the National Hurricane Center. Naples right now, 76 miles per hour. We're not getting a lot of reports, obviously, from Miami and Marathon and Key West, not reporting at all any winds at the time, for the time being, and maybe for the next week or so. We'll have to see. Hurricane warnings for 18 million people all up and down the Florida coastline. Towards Georgia, we have a hurricane warning up towards Valdosta, Albany, Georgia. And then we have, for the first time in history, a tropical storm warning for Atlanta, Georgia. So that's historic for them. They remember Hurricane Opal that brought devastating floods and winds. This could be very similar for the folks in Georgia. Now, our wind field, as I mentioned, 80 miles away from the center of the storm. That's where we're feeling the hurricane force wind gusts. 220 miles from the center of the storm, tropical storm force winds. So we are definitely this time. Tornado threat. I know Rick was talking about this earlier today. We're going to continue to see the tornado threat on the northeast quadrant side of the storm. So that's going to be ongoing throughout the day today. We actually have a tornado warned storm. If we could zoom in. My apologies, we can't, around the Fort Pierce area, a tornado warned storm. This is our future radar. We actually might see multiple landfalls of this hurricane as it scrapes the coastline. So there's Tampa, and this is 2 a.m. overnight on Monday, and we're expecting the worst part of that storm surge, unfortunately, to go into the Tampa Bay area. That's why folks are very concerned. And then towards Cedar Key, and then towards Tallahassee, and this is 11 a.m. on Monday, and then we'll see, the effects moving into Georgia, Alabama up towards the Tennessee River Valley and into Kentucky. Storm surge, you've heard us talk about this, very vulnerable area, more vulnerable than the east coast of Florida. So in some cases, this could be a worst case scenario. 10 to 15 feet is going to inundate all of these little areas that are low-lying, below sea level in some cases. And the Tampa Bay area certainly could see upwards of 10 feet. And that's why they are so concerned, and there's evacuations ongoing. Radar estimated precipitation, Shep, 10 to 12, already a foot of rainfall in South Florida. We can expect upwards of a foot, maybe 15 inches of rain as the system moves in and continues to move northward. But the story here, and I know we've been focusing in on it, is the storm surge. And that is going to be potentially devastating for these low-lying areas. In some cases, they haven't seen a hurricane like this in 100 years. So folks have not ever seen something like this. We do have a trough that's influencing this hurricane, and that was well predicted. We're going to start to see this weaken a little bit. That doesn't take the punch out of the potential storm surge along the coast. But certainly you can see the trough and some of that drier air working in. I don't think we're going to see this storm strengthen anymore, which is great news. But potentially where it goes, if it remains a little bit more offshore, Shepard, then I'm concerned about the worst side of that storm, the northeast quadrant, going into all of these areas. So this is the latest track, and we will get a new track at 2 p.m. But right now, I mean, it's the worst case scenario for all up and down the west coast of Florida. Back to you.
Janice, it's either going to come inland here in the next few hours, or it's going to skirt that coast. And if it stays over water, it's just hard to imagine what that whole coast from southwest Florida up through Tampa is going to look like.
Absolutely. A difference between 30 and 50 miles offshore is really going to be the difference between a worst case scenario and a not so bad scenario. So at this point in time, we are expecting the center of the storm to remain a little bit offshore, but truly all of these areas just can't take the water, that pileup of water that's going into all of these low-lying zones that can be completely covered in water.
Dr. Mark DeMaria from the Hurricane Center talking about that on WSVN 7 in South Florida now. Let's listen.
Force for all that water to recede. Is that correct?
Our connection isn't great, so let's go to Adam Housley, who's live in Key Largo now. Adam, how's it looking?
Well, Shepard, we wait for those winds to switch, and you and I have been talking about it for several hours. We're starting to see it, or at least we believe it's what's happening, because the wind gusts will still come from this way, but I'm watching the trees over there start to blow this way, and these trees are starting to swirl, which we hadn't seen. They've been blowing in that direction the entire time, so we got to believe that means the winds are finally starting to switch from the other direction. I did get a chance to go out and shoot some video as well. You know, you had a guest on earlier talking about the water going out of Tampa Bay, being drawn out by this storm. We had it drawn out here. It's been out now for a couple of hours. It's still out. We expect that water to come back with a vengeance. That water being taken out by Hurricane Irma will be pushed back in as it swirls. Look at the video. The bay is empty. It even got more empty after this video. It's very eerie to look out, and for maybe even a quarter mile at the height, to see no water. It was as if a tide took everything away. Now we're told by our weather folks, I talked to Rick Reichmuth and Janice Dean, both tell us that it's going to come back almost like a tsunami. Not as fast as a tsunami, but a tsunami draws water out and then pushes it back. Same idea. This storm drew the water out. It's going to push it back now on the bay side here in Key Largo. The question is, it's coming in at a higher tide, and how much water will come into this area below me? We just don't know. We do know there's been flooding on the other side of the island, also in Isla Mirada, which is only about 5 miles from us. We were there yesterday. One of the viewers that we've become friends with who stayed here in a Cat 5 rated building sent us a photo of a home that's under like 3 or 4 feet of water in that direction over towards the ocean side, which we knew the water there, Shepard, had come up last night at about midnight. As you can tell, we're still getting wind from the east, so it still hasn't switched. But the wind gusts will come from here, and then all of a sudden we'll get one from a different angle. So that leads us to believe that this thing is finally starting to get past us at some point. Remember, we had hurricane force winds here at 11 o'clock last night, and we've had winds consistently at 30 miles an hour or more since 10 a.m. yesterday morning. This area continues to get battered, Shepard, by this storm. I know Steve Harrigan, my colleague, is about 170 miles as the crow flies from me, just a bit more west, a bit more west than we are, almost north and just a little bit. He's starting to get the stuff that we felt yesterday, and this stuff that we've been dealing with the last few hours is now coming his way and to the people of that part of Florida, Shepard.
Adam, have you you said that you're starting to notice the wind shifting. Have you noticed any change in speed?
Yeah, it's weird. I don't know if it's because of the way the angle is, Shepard. We'll get a gust like right now that comes through. It's pretty powerful. Not as bad as it was an hour ago when I was with you. And then all of a sudden you'll be able to stand like there's no wind at all. It's a little breeze, and all of a sudden you'll get one from a different angle. So we're getting the same gust, but you can start telling them that they're coming. And look at these things here. These palm trees were blowing this way for the last 3 or 4 hours. Now they're kind of swirling, Shepard. You see how they're swirling? And in this direction, I don't know if we can show over here. Lloyd, can we show Shepard over here this direction? So these are now blowing almost south to north, Shepard. Look at, if you see the palm trees out there in the distance, they're almost, the wind's coming from the south over there by the interstate. That's the interstate over there, maybe 100 yards from us. We're still kind of getting it from east to west. So this is a different looking wind and gusts that we've seen in a number of hours, Shepard.
Adam Housley in the Upper Keys, Key Largo. Keep in mind, a lot of these pictures are very dramatic, but none of the areas where we've been taking you live were hit by the eye wall of this storm. The eye wall went over a lower key in the Florida Keys and has been over open water ever since. So other areas, it's not pleasant, and certainly lots of damage is being done. There's storm surge coming in, but we haven't gone to an area where the eye wall has actually hit. We believe that the eye itself is still about 22 to 26 miles wide. So a swath that wide will eventually be hit by this eye wall, and it'll be interesting to see how things hold up. 130 miles an hour at the strongest point is a lot of force to take, and it's possible that that storm stays right offshore and skirts up the southwest Florida coast. That would be a horrible situation for everyone, because the storm would remain strong with the water that feeds that storm as it rides up the coast. Or, and it appears this is what the National Hurricane Center is leaning toward now, if it continues to go due north, this will become a Marco Island, Naples storm, Everglades City, with that eye coming right over that heavily populated area, then going north, presumably just to the east of Fort Myers and Cape Coral, and then continuing up the peninsula, so just to the east of Tampa. What would that mean? That would mean that would mean Fort Myers and Cape Coral and up into Sarasota and Bradenton, up into Tampa and St. Petersburg. All of that, if this northern motion continues, would be to the west of the eye of the storm. That would be really good for those major population centers once you get up there, because, as we've been saying forever, the east side of the storm, east side of the eye, has the strongest winds. The northeast quadrant is where the worst of it all is. So that's one possibility. The other is that the storm stays right offshore, and that's really what the models have been suggesting, that it'll ride up that southwest Florida coast while in the water and just pummeling all of those same areas I just mentioned. When will we know which it's going to do? We will know it when it does it, and not until. This due north track, when we first saw it about 3 hours ago, the storm first started tracking due north instead of going north-northwest. And when we looked at it, our meteorology office said, we think that's just a bobble. It's not that the storm is headed due north. It's just at this point, when they're taking this reading, it shows north. Well, now we've had 3 reporting hours in a row of the storm headed due north. And if that is the case, Marco Island, Naples, Everglades City, Irma is on the way. Brigadier General Glenn Hagler is on the phone with us. He's the Vice Director for Domestic Operations at the National Guard Bureau. Sir, it's nice to speak with you. Thank you.
For Harvey, and we're drawing from that pool to reinforce Florida.
And tell me what that would mean.
So that means that we're metering in troops to the tune of up to 8,000 based upon Florida's request, maybe even to 10,000, and all different kinds of specialties that they need in order to reinforce their efforts throughout the state.
And specifically, I guess different guardsmen have different skill sets, but I guess they'd be all across the relief and recovery effort.
All across, absolutely. We're supporting local officials with anything they may need. We're bringing specific things like transportation, engineers, military, police, aviation, search and rescue, and infantry and command and control capability.
And how soon would they be able to get in there and get to work if necessary?
So we have soldiers on the move already. You should see